All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bonnie Trowbridge. I am the executive director at Drive Clean Colorado, and it was our pleasure last year to meet with so many of you that are here and to work with Colorado State University and NREL and others on this project that we're about to hear from. We have Dr. Thomas Bradley, who's going to be speaking with us about this project, and it is an interactive uh, I guess we'll have some surveys and so forth. So I encourage you to please engage and interact with us. Turn your camera on if you'd like, and we will go from there. Tom, are you ready? Can I turn it over to you?
That sounds great. Thanks so much, Bonnie. Hello, everyone. My name is Tom Bradley, and I serve as a professor in the Department of Systems Engineering and College of Engineering here at Colorado State University. And I was also the PI for this program that we executed last year with this set of great collaborators. The purpose of the program was to try to sort of develop some understanding of what the role will be of resilience and resilience infrastructure in planning out Colorado's electric vehicle infrastructure. And so this was a program that was really conducted between Colorado State University, CDOT, the Colorado Energy Office, uh, Drive Clean Colorado, the National Renewable Energy Lab, now called the National Lab of the Rockies, and Colorado State University Extension, which is sort of a piece of the Colorado State University family whose objective is to specialize in engagement and outreach and extension across the state of Colorado. So again, I give great credit. It would be remiss if didn't give acknowledgments to all of the folks, students and faculty and partners that helped us do this work. So let me just sort of give you a sense about what we're doing and where we're going with this presentation. So my goal is to talk a little bit about Colorado's, so a little bit of the background. So help us all to come to some common understanding of Colorado's EV infrastructure. And when we think about the words that I already said in the title about EV infrastructure resilience, we need to think about what that means and what are the implications of trying to think about EV infrastructure through a sort of resilience lens. I'll describe, and my purpose, the main purpose, we'll spend most of the time here talking about the process of stakeholder engagement that we went through to be able to come to an understanding of what the sort of state of infrastructure is in the state of Colorado and some of the things that we could do to try to improve infrastructure resilience around the state. My goal will be I'll try to share with you all the sort of primary results and discussion, our big takeaways, the kinds of results we got out of that, what we really learned as sort of a synthesis of all of the conversations that we had. And I'll try to transmit that. And, I think there'll be a couple of places where I will really ask for your insights and ask for your participation in this. And, that'd be welcome in any way that folks can think about. So let's start out with get a little bit of practice. So, it's the modern world out there. Of course, I teach classes online occasionally, et cetera. So, one of the things that I do to try to make sure that especially with students, you want to make sure that they can participate in the classroom and really get engaged. So I put this color slide, and this slide color will appear throughout our presentation today. And it sort of exists as a little bit of a fair warning, okay, which is that if you'd like to participate, you're more than welcome to do so. But with this slide, I'm really going to ask for everybody to sort of like face the screen, the opportunity for us to actually have a real conversation here. So at this stage, I've asked our colleagues at the Office of Extension Engagement here to put together a poll. Should be able to see it through the QR code or just link to that simple, the sort of simple web address here or whatever. And the questions that we want to sort of ask real quick is get a baseline of where everybody is and what they're kind of thinking about EV infrastructure. So the questions are things like, Do you agree with the statement that EVs are sort of no longer a transportation niche and are sort of becoming something that is going to affect your community? You can answer the question, were you involved in our outreach and engagement activities last year? Is this follow-up for you or is this new? And maybe how would you rate your current understanding of EV resilience and charging infrastructure in Colorado? And let's see, hopefully everybody will learn a little bit. We'll have some real conversations, but give you a good baseline. Willie, any other comments or things to get folks started?
Yeah, it looks like people are clicking away, which is great. So you can either click on that QR code. I've also dropped it in the chat, and I'll do that again. We have these first three questions here at the beginning. And like Tom said, we'll use them to kind of have a little bit of dialogue. We also have, I think, five or six that we'll have at the end of the presentation. And this is really just to get a capture some of the conversation and thoughts as they relate to EV. And during our conversations that we did with Tim and Dr. Bradley and Bonnie, we did a separate kind of poll that captured a lot of the data they used for their paper and for this presentation. So we appreciate your participation. And like I said, people are clicking away. I'm going to jump to number 2 here soon. So if you can't get in there or you're not participating yet, please let us know in the chat and we can make sure you can get in there. But it looks like most people are going at it. So appreciate it. I'll go to number 2 here in about 2 minutes.
Well, I'll ask. So I think the prompt there is hopefully folks can work their way through those surveys and all that kind of stuff like that. I probably won't sit here staring at the screen for 2 minutes, but let's keep marching and see if we can talk more about where we're going. All right. Okay, thanks all for your participation. Again, you'll see a couple of, I will be asking for your input and, chat as we keep moving here. So let's get this quick background, right, which is just going to be on Colorado's EV infrastructure and what are we trying to do here? Perhaps self-evidently, it's absolutely true, but Colorado is a really national leader in EV infrastructure build out. And we've been, in partnership with the municipalities, with state government, and with the federal government, we've been really building up, a nationally recognized important set of EV infrastructure. And when we think about EV infrastructure, we should think about things such as electric vehicle charging and electric vehicle, charging plazas, the power infrastructure that can support these, auto dealerships and maintenance activities. All of these sort of things have to work together for electric transportation to be able to work. And again, Colorado has done a really great job, I think, recognized as doing a really great job of being able to bring all of those things together to really enable the growth in electric vehicles that we've seen both as personal and also as fleet vehicles in the state. So the challenge to that, perhaps, is that the federal priorities to date have really been around supporting alternative fuel corridors, as the key words that they kind of use, and electric vehicle corridors. And what that means is that these are infrastructure has sort of been built out and emphasizes travelers, and it emphasizes main highways and all these kind of things like that. So that's great, but it also, you can imagine, leaves some holes or leaves some opportunities for us in EV infrastructure that the state really has to put the priority set on. In the state, we do want to be able to support rural communities more, and we want to be able to support, local uses of electric transportation. We want to be able to support things like a public EV fleet. You think about municipal fleets or things like that. And so the federal priorities have not been as responsive to that, perhaps. And so the opportunities for us as a state to make the kind of, to make those priorities ours. So what we've seen in the last couple of years, I think, and this is sort of my, opinionating here or whatever, is that we've really seen the set of electric vehicle applications grow. Whereas if we were having this conversation 10 years ago or something like that, we would mainly be talking about personal electric vehicles or something like that. Well, now we are seeing much more growth in medium and heavy duty electric vehicles, in electric vehicles that are in public fleets like transit fleets or school buses or even first responders. We're seeing electric vehicles in fleets that are performing, like services to the community, such as fire and hospital and delivery and sanitation and all these kind of things like that. So it's easy to see, perhaps, that as the our dependence on the electric vehicle fleet grows with their sort of growth in these applications, we need to think together about how reliable and how resilient this infrastructure is. It's important, of course, if your electric vehicle, that is your personal vehicle, can't make it to your work or something like that. That's bad news. But it could be really bad if the first responders can't do their job because of electric vehicles being out of commission or something like that, right? So that's what the point is. We have to think more holistically, I think, at this point about electric vehicle infrastructure resilience. So when we think about resilience, and when we as engineers or as scientists sort of design and think and define resilience, resilient systems are those kinds of systems that can adapt or bounce back and continue to function even under stresses from without. And those stresses, sometimes when we think about infrastructure systems, are things like natural disasters, like wildfire, power outages, or floods. They can also be human-caused disasters like cyber attack or communication outages. And they can even be things that, nobody's really at fault at, but are just sort of societal problems. Think about things like workforce outages. If we don't have enough people to be able to maintain electric vehicle infrastructure, then this electric vehicle infrastructure will not be able to adapt or bounce back or continue to function if it is under stress, even from something that's as simple as a hailstorm. So the broad point here is that if we assert that we want to have more resilient electric vehicle systems, we want to have electric vehicles be part of the mix of transportation that happens in the state of Colorado in order for us to realize our social and climate and pollution beneficence goals. Well, then we need to be able to build those systems stronger and safer and more resilient in the face of the natural disasters and shocks and stressors that will be inevitable in the world. So if we sort of assert then that the function of the electric vehicle infrastructure is to enable transportation across the state, and that electric vehicles are going to be part of that transportation mix from here on out, well, then we need to design the electric vehicle infrastructure to be resilient. And that requires the cooperation of a variety of systems, including roadways and transportation networks, including communication networks. I mean, we might not all be aware, but there are cellular data communication systems that are part of electric vehicle support equipment that don't work, that if they don't work, then the EVSE don't work. We need to ensure that electric power networks are functional and up. We need to make sure that our installation and service and maintenance networks are up. And even in the context of our cities, in the context of our communities, in the context of our rural communities, we need to make sure that people understand, what electric vehicle infrastructure is, that we know how to direct people in disaster events, that we have the connection between what the actual community needs are and what our infrastructure is providing. So, the big picture here is easy to get behind, which is, I think, if we want for electric vehicles to be part of the big picture of Colorado's infrastructure future, we need to design them to be resilient and functional off into the far future. So in response to that charge, this team that we were able to assemble of our sort of state and local experts, we're able to go out and make the case to the Department of Energy that they should help us to do this kind of planning. And we were able, this was the sort of sponsorship and funding that provided us the resources to go out and do that stakeholder engagement. So what we did is we did some, I'll go to the next slide here, technical work. We did some work that's here in the College of Engineering at the university where we were trying to figure out how do we sort of use computers and use maps and models to be able to understand what is infrastructure resilience and how much, how resilient is our current infrastructure and how much could we design in. But more specific to our purposes today, the other thing that we were tasked to do is to go out and incorporate community and stakeholder input. So it's easy to say that, from a desk in Fort Collins, we will not have a very good understanding of what the needs of communities across the state are for resilient infrastructure. We need to go out and we need to talk to folks and we need to understand what those applications are. We understand what everybody's concerns are and make sure that when we are identifying risks, when we're building infrastructure, when we're thinking about how to make the current infrastructure more resilient, we make sure that that really meets community needs. And then the last step is basically try to help the state and our local entities compose and document a plan that's responsive to the above so that as EV infrastructure gets built out, as our transportation and power networks get built out over the coming years, that we will be able to direct those networks and engineer them to be able to realize resilient infrastructure. Okay, so this is sort of the preamble. Now, what I'm going to try to do is spend, hopefully most of our time actually talking about what it is that we did and what it is that we found that came out of that. All right, so let me talk a little bit about what we did. So our task was, again, to try to go out and discover and think and work with the communities to understand what their concerns were, what the risks were, the needs and opportunities, and what we could actually do about it to be able to build resilient infrastructure. So we went out last year and over the course of almost the whole year, basically, we met in 14 different Colorado communities and talked to 150 plus participants. You can sort of see the places that we went in the state with great engagement from our community engagement partners. And we were trying to really cover the geography of the state, and we were trying to really get an understanding of what kind of stakeholders might there be for thinking about EV infrastructure. So we tried to get engagement with workforce development partners. We tried to get engagement with electricians and union representatives. We tried to get engagement with folks that were from the EV sort of industry, whether that's electric vehicle manufacturers or electric vehicle supply equipment manufacturers in the state, et cetera. We were in rural Colorado, we were in urban Colorado, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So really working hard to try to get an understanding of what the opportunity space was around this. And basically what happened is we would go into these communities, we would do some organization, and we would get a group of about 10 or 15 folks who would be able to, from a variety of different places around the community and would be able to come and talk to us about what their concerns were. So it gives you a little sense. What the format of these were is pretty simple. We would go and talk a little bit about, some of the same things we just talked about, trying to get an introduction to what EV resilience and EV resilience in infrastructure looks like. We would ask the same questions that you all are helping us to answer right now. And we would really spend most of the time in open dialogue, trying to have people communicate to us about what their local concerns were, what's the things that happen that are challenges locally to infrastructure resilience, what kind of electric vehicle fleets are in their communities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the last thing that we're doing is basically we have now written some reports. We share them with our partners in the state, and our goal is to come and report on these activities, which is what I'm doing right now. Okay, so let me get to the results. What are some of the things that we learned by doing this? I'll start with some simple types of activities and things. So the first question I always get is, what kind of folks what kind of folks actually attended these workshops? And the answer is simple. It was all types of Coloradoans, geographically distributed across the entire state. So of course, you can imagine it's very important for us to be able to, to demonstrate that, especially when we talk about something like electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure, that we're not just talking about this in the context of the Front Range, or we're not just talking about this in the context of Denver County. But this is something that, of course, we want to be held accountable to the needs of the entire state of Colorado. So you can sort of see, we had participation from across the state, from the north and the south, east and the west. I think with conscious effort, we were really able to do that. Now, that said, the kind of people who show up to a engagement event, give up half their morning to talk about electric vehicle infrastructure, are people who like electric vehicles and are interested in electric vehicles. That's easy to say. So about 64% of the folks that we talked to said that either they or their workplace used electric vehicles for their fleet or personal vehicles. So I think this is some sign, again, that there is, first of all, that people from across the state and from a variety of geographies and all these kind of things like that are getting exposed to electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure. You may know the stat, last year about 25% of the vehicles sold in Colorado were electric vehicles of some kind, including plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. But the point is that folks are, these are no longer, so I might assert, these are no longer niche vehicles. These are things that people are coming into exposure either through their personal vehicles or through fleet vehicles. And we talk about fleet vehicles, these might be things like, many of the maintenance vehicles for municipalities across Colorado are now electric vehicles, because you can go out and get an electric vehicle that's a pickup truck and save a lot of money and save pollution and do all this kind of stuff like that. And it can make some sense. So I think the broad point there is only that, yes, that we're getting a broad set of people in Colorado, and that the people that we were talking to are largely do have some understanding of electric vehicle and infrastructures. A couple of results on the right here, I think, though, give us some other insights into some of the resilience concerns in Colorado communities. So our first question here that we asked 150 people or so is, what's your greatest concern? And you sort of hear, you can see large fractions of people are worried about the infrastructure, that the infrastructure, its unreliability, or the charging station not working. These are very common experiences that people who have electric vehicles have come across. And so that is a source of concern. But the second piece that you sort of see a main slice here is around the vehicle itself. So it sort of, again, makes the case that, and this is some of the conversations that we had with these participants, were sort of that often in Colorado climates, and particularly in cold weather and winter, the vehicles their performance will degrade. And this is true for your Tesla. This is true for, a transit bus. So some of the concerns are really about infrastructure, and some of the concerns are about the actual powertrain of the vehicle itself. But it sort of makes the case, again, that I think that EV infrastructure, there is some concern around resilience. The second pie graph that I kind of display here is a question that's really more oriented towards community resilience. So when we think about resilience in general, of course, there's the technical pieces. Is the power on, and do we have the ability to drive between point A and point B? But we also have to think about the community, that actually there's humans in the loop on this, that this is a social activity. And so we asked the question about, does your community have a plan for electric vehicles in the case of a resilience event? And obviously the majority of people said no, that we don't have a plan for electric vehicles. Again, even though they might be a large fraction of the fleet in many of the municipalities that we talk to. So how can we, the question is, all right, well, if we don't plan for it, how can we support, the average driver or the electric transit bus, that in case of a resilience event, in case of a power outage, in case of a, weather event or something like that, we obviously need to continue to have a functional transportation system. Well, if we can't plan for it, then we won't achieve it, obviously. So I think, to me, at least, the broad takeaway of these early discussions was that communities do see a need for a comprehensive approach to EV resilient infrastructure. So this includes, sure, vehicles and power infrastructure and transportation charging infrastructure, but it also includes things like community resilience and operations and planning. So it sort of, I think, makes a case for a very broad viewpoint of what we need to enable in order to realize resilient infrastructure. Okay, I have so then, I'm going to present just a couple more bullet points, and then I'm going to ask for some insight and input from you all. So fair warning again. So my next task here, I hope, is to sort of try to share. I mean, it would be too much, I think, for me to go through all of the questions that we asked and all of the insights that we got out of folks and all of the quotes or something like that. So I'm going to try to distill it into what I think are a couple of key themes that perhaps we can talk out, and that I can ask for your insights and critiques. And I'm going to try to, so those key themes are what I present here. First of all, local business transit and fleet insights, workforce and technical capacity, emergency preparedness, and grid dependency. Let's talk about those, and we'll take a break, and I'll ask for your insights again. So let me see if I can kind of present these thematic outcomes, key learnings that came out of this. The first one is what we kind of labeled local business and transit and fleet insights. So our key learnings here were that, in many parts of the state, across the state, small businesses and dealerships and local fleets really play a critical role in normalizing and enabling and educating consumers about EV adoption. And they really have a role in shaping resilient charging networks across Colorado. So we very often found that, much of the hub of electric vehicle infrastructure in municipalities in rural Colorado or something like that was focused on small businesses and dealerships and the local municipal fleets. So it sort of makes the case again that there are resources that are in our communities that we need to make sure that we're tasking with understanding and building out electric vehicle infrastructure. We came across many, many examples where supermarkets and visitor centers and tourism hubs and these kind of things like that can be locations where electric vehicle infrastructure, whether public or private, already exists. And these can really be the focal points for community resilience. So as we do community resilience planning around electric vehicle infrastructure, we need to think about where are people going to charge, and where is there backup power, and where is there the ability for us to co-locate electric vehicle charging with community resilience, such as warming stations and stuff like that. Well, we need to recognize some of the assets that are already in our communities around these things. We definitely heard again and again that, of course, actually it turns out that transit agencies are some of the pieces of local infrastructure that are doing the transition to electric vehicles, and especially electric transit, right away. This is happening all over the state in rural and urban communities, et cetera. And so we need to recognize again that these are going to be key resilience assets, that transportation for people who are, rely on transit agencies is going to be very important in resilience events. And so we need to make sure that those municipal transit agencies or regional transit agencies are really included in planning. So, and then it just sort of says that there is a strong need here for us to include municipal and state fleets in this planning activity, and that there's more to do. It's not that they're, I don't think anybody across the state, I don't think anybody asserted that they had it figured out what to do with their local infrastructure around electric vehicles, that there's more planning, more infrastructure investments, more training is needed in order for us to make the transition fully towards electrification. Many, many, many of the transit agencies or police departments or all those kind of things like that were at pilot stage, had plans to electrify by 2040 and beyond. But I think, again, there's a strong need and a call that we heard for folks that they need more help in order to be able to make those transitions. So I just include an interesting quote here again, which I think is exemplifying that, which is that, we talked to a bunch of first responders. Many of them are doing things like pilots around having a Tesla police car or something like that. And it's exciting and it's great. But it might be difficult. There's many steps to be taken in terms of infrastructure, in terms of improvement in technologies for us to be able to fully electrify these kind of fleets. So I'm just going to take you two more of these slides, and then I'll ask you for, if any of these things are really making sense. The second thing we kind of learned was around workforce and technical capacity. So a recurring theme in our conversations was a lack of like workforce, and I'm using that term very broadly, readiness to support widespread EV adoption. And this can include things like technical workforce at CDOT or at local municipalities or at the local electricians to be able to work on and support mass adoption of electric vehicles. So even in urban parts of Colorado, more electric vehicle and electric vehicle support equipment trained technicians are really needed. And the diversity of types and of networks means that many parts can be delayed and that it takes a while to service these things. So there's a need even in the most urban or most developed parts of Colorado to be able to do that work. In rural parts of Colorado, many of the participants really recognized a need for this utility and EVSE electrician training and saw it as an opportunity for investment in our local community colleges and tech schools to be able to develop that kind of skill set. And my bullet points here are we toured at Pueblo Community College, and they have an electric vehicle infrastructure and training program, right? That is very successful in doing exactly these kind of things. But even first responders told us that even amongst first responders, there's still a need for more training to deal with the specifics of EV emergency response in accidents or those kind of things like that. So even, where we should have lots of resources and where we should have lots of understanding, there's still a workforce need. So it's in technical training, it's in first responder training. It's also in engineering and planning and understanding these kind of needs within municipalities. All right, last one, and then I promise we'll take eager for your input. But the last one, or the second, is emergency response, preparedness, and transportation. So we heard again and again that stakeholders consistently raised concerns about the dependency of public and private EV services on EVs, especially during these things like wildfires and blizzards and floods. We heard that in many resort communities, the tourism can strain infrastructure that is already there. We end up with lines at the charging stations and these kind of things on ski weekends. But it also, we heard again and again that when we think about new municipal fleets like electric school buses and stuff like that, it means that we need to think about how do these things operate on a minus 40-degree day or minus 25-degree day in Steamboat Springs in this example. Do we need to have redundant vehicles? Do we need to think about emergency planning? Do we need to think about optimization of operations in order to take advantage of these vehicles for their purposes, but also ensure that on when the weather conspires against us or something like that, that we have the resources and technologies and systems to be able to do this function. So again, I think we sort of heard from a broad set of Coloradans, a informed and diverse set of understanding and concerns around EV infrastructure. So, okay, now I'm going to I'm going to take a deep breath. I've been talking for too long or something already here. So I'm going to sort of say, this is a chance. Do these themes I sort of started with a discussion where we're going to have like 5 of these themes that kind of come out of this. Do these themes resonate with your experience? This is a feedback session, right? Where we sort of tell you what it was that we heard across the state. And either, you can tell me that we got it right or got it wrong, or you can tell me that there's nuances here that you can inform us or help us to illustrate these themes. I am going to maybe it's just sort of I would urge folks, to raise your hands and I'll call on you or something like that if folks want to participate. So I'm going to take a deep, I'm going to ask for your participation here. Any comments or input?
Okay, I can't find where to raise my hand, so.
Go ahead, Dwayne, please.
DJ Enderly with the City of Monte Vista. A lot of those themes are things that we've seen.
Yeah.
I mean, even Excel, an energy provider, tried for about 2 months to have electric vehicles here in the San Luis Valley, and then they pulled their fleet because they couldn't run a full day in the winter. So they're back to combustion engines here in the San Luis Valley. We have charging stations at the Rural Electric Cooperative here in the downtown, and then they're putting another one in near a hotel. And it's rare that you can go through the entire city and see one of them being used.
Mm.
And in the summer it's a little bit more, but in the winter it's just not something that we see very often. And some of the things that I've heard, you know, working not only with my public works, because I talked about putting them in there, and his biggest concern was again the lifetime of it. Our PD was still the same thing. Like we can't run a full 12-hour shift in a single car in the winter. So how are we going to be able to, you know, if we run out of those, how's it going to work out for us? And we can't just have summertime vehicles. And then my biggest thing that I get is questions from our local communities members on why is the city invested in this? We don't have enough vehicles that it's going to pay for itself. The city hasn't put in a single one, but that's not the perception of the residents. Because Excel put in the one, the other one's put in by the REC and the co-op. So I mean, we got those things going on. I would like to see more, but at the same time, I'm getting, you know, negative feedback from the residents, and I'm just not seeing them utilized. And until the cold weather stuff and distance thing really gets taken care of, I just don't see it being a huge thing in the San Luis Valley where it'll be used a lot. Um, should we still set the infrastructure? Probably, yeah, obviously. But you know, unless there's funding that comes with it to make it
Yeah.
happen, I can't afford any more unfunded mandates from our governor's office.
I think that's all. It speaks to the geographic dependence of this. Just as you said, you know, it's sort of the challenge is this going to work in the San Luis? Is it going to work in my community? And this is absolutely a key theme, I think, that comes out of the discussions that we've had, which is, I mean, and I think I alluded to it and pointed at it a couple times, and I'm going to keep doing it because yeah, I think that this is ours is a diverse state in terms of the, the type of vehicles that people are driving, in terms of the climate, in terms of all of the need that we have for transportation infrastructure, in terms of the purposes that our municipal fleets are put to. And so it just sort of says, yeah, there's no one size fits all. That is absolutely going to be the truth. So I think that these kind of insights are exactly the thing that we need to transmit to a plan, to a statewide planning process, which is that it really needs to be coordinated with and engaged with community need. And if it can do that, then okay, maybe we can meet the needs the way that they're expressed and the way that they are actually realized in our communities. And if it ends up being something just as you're describing, where where we don't have that input, well, then we'll just fail. It won't do the things we want it to do. So yeah, thank you for that insight. Richard, yeah, do you want to interject, please?
Yeah, so Alamosa, just down the road from DJ on the last one, we actually do see, I think, a fair bit of the corridor use, right? So Tesla put in a supercharging station here last year in downtown Alamosa. Actually, the other side of DJ and Del Norte Rivian's apparently got a station there. And then we've got the visitor center in Alamosa with some state-funded ones. And so we're seeing a fair bit, and it's obviously much higher in the summertime. Our visitation from tourists is much higher in the summertime as well. Thinking about kind of getting beyond that corridor use, it took about 3 years through 2 different Excel programs and way more hassle than it was worth to put in a level 2 charging station at the courts building next door for them to utilize the one state fleet vehicle that they got that's a battery plug-in hybrid. And my own personal experience to the comment about the kind of emergency responder responses, I used to drive a plug-in hybrid, a Ford C-Max. It was in a very minor kind of accident that did end up impacting the front engine cavity. And the fire department was especially concerned that it was going to explode, and that they had to disconnect the battery. And then it took them, 20 minutes to figure out how to do that. And so I think that the training piece can be huge.
Yeah.
for our volunteer fire department. So several things that you mentioned just kind of resonated. I wanted to share that.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that insight. Yeah, I've definitely heard that before. Again, I think the challenges of these vehicles in rural and volunteer fire departments can be stark. Well, I've one more, I have two more of these takeaways that maybe can engender some more conversation. So let's do it. And again, I think we'll have plenty of time for Q&A and such. Well, one of the other insights that we really came away with, I think, is the diversity again, and geographic diversity, and sociocultural diversity of the state means that we have, I mean, everybody recognizes we have a strong urban-rural divide in the state, and we really were able to see that in the ways that people gave us feedback about EV infrastructure resilience. So you could imagine some of these bullet points are self-evident, I think, but urban areas generally did express greater familiarity with EVs and a stronger support for electrification in municipal fleets and such. But there was a lot of emphasis, I think, and recognition that things like resilience equity is also a challenge. If we have parts of the state or parts of our urban mix or something like that that are particularly vulnerable to to things like vandalism or to delayed charger maintenance or things like that, that can lead to the idea that in a disaster or in a resilience event, that those communities do not have access to EV infrastructure charging, and that can be quite damaging. Also interesting, I think, was that when folks were talking about the types of resilience events that concern them, oftentimes urban resilience events really focused on the urban and wildlife interface, right? Things like wildfires or extreme weather or things like that were particularly of mind. Of course, we have had a series of urban wildfire challenges over the last couple of years that I think were top of mind. Rural participants, again, I think sort of noted that EV infrastructure investments often have bypassed disadvantaged communities in rural areas, which reinforced existing geographic divides, of course. And the challenge between infrastructure being designed to serve a transit or a tourist traffic rather than locals. Again, concerns about affordability and accessibility, often in context of like multifamily housing in things like rural ski areas and stuff like that. These become some of the challenges. And then just to underscore, I mean, I sort of think that there's no use tiptoeing around it or something like that, but electric vehicle infrastructure needs to be, or is the subject of some skepticism, where we need to think about its cost, and we need to think about the role of mandates being a key word that we heard many times, and whether electric vehicle infrastructure is really relevant to the daily lives of Coloradoans. It sort of says, again, that it's important, and I think one of the things that the state will be well served to do is to frame electric vehicle infrastructure as something that is about local benefit, and it's a prerequisite to really us having a functional and resilient transportation system in the future. And it's not necessarily about, keywords like climate change or something like that, right? Okay. So it's important to recognize these things. And again, I think all of this leads to is reinforced by the types of discussions that we've been having. The last real, key takeaway, I hope, for this is around planning and policy readiness. So we sort of learned that, it's easy to say, but that the development and the engineering and the activity that is building out of electric transportation infrastructure and resilient electric transportation infrastructure is going to require administrative and political capacity. And we can think about that in the form of things like resilience planning. If every municipality will need to develop resilience plans. What do we do when the power goes out? What do we do when the wildfire strikes or whatever. These need to be integrated with things like EV readiness planning. So many municipalities have undergone EV readiness planning, public transit planning, emergency preparedness planning, the state's infrastructure planning, and all sort of that kind of thing. All of these things need to work together, and that takes effort. So what we discovered is that policy readiness really varied considerably across the regions, that stakeholders often recognized that the costs of making more resilient infrastructure are often difficult to justify. And that's true in, let's say, like normal resilience contexts, like we need to have resilient power, we need to have resilient water, we need to have resilience for the purposes of elder care or something. All those kind of things are conventional and maybe even well understood resilience contexts. And if we start talking about electric vehicle infrastructure resilience planning, then we can recognize that those might be politically difficult conversations. But the other thing that was interesting, I think, is that there are some resources that are perhaps understood, less understood, in terms of things like grants and coaching services that are available. So I'm sure everybody in this call is aware of things like the Energy Office and Charge Ahead Colorado grants and all these kind of resources that are available across the state to be able to support this. And everybody who has the invite from Drive Clean Colorado knows that they're available to do things like coaching of EV infrastructure and planning and all these kind of things like that. But it was interesting again to discover that this is not a universal understanding across the entire state, even again in in places that should be sort of well connected to these networks. So it's tough. It takes real resources to be able to do this, and we should just recognize that there are folks that are able to help us. Okay, again, I'm hopeful that some of those things were, did that make sense? Is there people, do you want to a great chance for folks to interject here? Set me straight. Other inputs you want to provide?
There's a couple questions in the chat, Dr. Bradley.
Yeah, I'll call on Jim Pidcock. Let me review the chat, and I'll see if I can make some other interjections here. Jim, do you want to speak up?
Sure, thank you. Just a couple of quick things. I represent the fire service through the fire marshal's office. Just anecdotally, I've noticed we don't, our department does not use EVs specifically, but a neighboring department does. And when I say we use EVs, I mean specific to smaller vehicles. Certainly, we don't have any fire engines, water tenders, anything large yet that's electric, although those are available and becoming more available. It's more the day-to-day, what I would call a chief's car, fire marshal's car, something like that, fleet vehicle, smaller fleet vehicle. And just anecdotally, I've heard from a couple departments around us that they like them. We're all kind of skeptical, and I think the skepticism runs along political and social lines, as you've already pointed out. So I think there's definitely some potential for that, in spite of the fact that I think you would say we are in a rural area. That might not be the best description. There's certainly a wide geographical diversity around here. The other comment I was going to make was relative to supply and demand. We're a ski resort, generally, not our entire district, but a big chunk of it is a ski resort. And we have many, many, many electric vehicles of all shapes and sizes. Probably a disproportionate amount relative to the rest of the state. And I think a lot of that has to do with the wherewithal of people who are driving these, the ability to buy them, and frankly, what vehicle they want to own and so forth. But I think because of that, we have a lot of charging infrastructure. It might be disproportionate to some of the other rural areas because of that supply and demand. We have a charging station outside the fire station here, but Town Hall has them, the ski resorts have them. anecdotally, again, I never hear anyone say, I can't get plugged in somewhere or something like that. And I'm also aware of hybrid use. So, like there are a lot of people that have a hybrid where they're not completely reliant on the electric by itself. And that seems to make a difference as well. So, from a supply and demand standpoint, I can tell you we probably have a disproportionate amount of either hybrid or fully electric vehicles. And the other part of that is the people have the wherewithal to put charging stations, frankly, in their houses.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about a plug-in extension cord. I mean, we have people with full-on battery systems that are charging their electric vehicle off the solar on their roof. So that's kind of what I call an all-in commitment to it,
Yeah.
knowing
Well,
that economically that's not feasible for everyone. So,
I mean, I think this is this your discussion resonates with things that we've talked about, and I mean, I think if you go, we can engineer. I mean, as putting my professor of engineering hat on here, whatever, we can engineer systems that are very, very robust, very resilient. You could put a backup power generator or backup batteries on every charger across the whole state or something like that. But the challenge is going to be that that's too expensive. That's not real. It's not actually providing value for money, right? So what we need to do, I mean, I think again, and I mean, I guess what I'm really hoping, and I think that to transmit out of this, and I think that we really heard from folks too, is that, the answer to this problem is not to just, 10x the number of charging stations we have across the state, and then the whole problem solves itself and it'll be great or something like that. No, I don't think that's realistic, and I don't think that's a good stewardship of the discussion and of the kind of, of the resources of the state. What we actually need to do is we need to, sort of think about how do we actually plan for these events, and how do we support the fleets that have electric vehicles, because those electric vehicles are just as you described, are often sort of paying their way with gas savings and maintenance savings and all those kind of things like that. How do we support that to be a viable way that you can have a chief's car, or you can have a police vehicle, or you can have a municipal bus, transit bus that is electrified, and realizing all of those benefits to its community, and that is also resilient enough that, well, on the one bad day a year or something like that, it can still do its job. So yeah, really grateful for the comment there. It speaks to, I'm just going to look at some of the comments. I think, maybe what I'll propose here is I'm going to try to sort of do some key takeaways here, and maybe get at a couple of key learnings that we emerged, and then maybe we have an hour and a half reserved here. Maybe that'll let folks who are at the top of the hour escape if they need to, but we'll have some more room for conversation. So, okay, the key takeaways to me is that, again, that we do have a little bit of a perception problem, and it's something that the community identifies as a real problem, which is that the infrastructure that we have around electric transportation systems is perceived as lacking resilience. And we talked about a lot of these pressures. And so I think, sort of in the context of this transition that we're undergoing towards electrified transportation, and I sort of, I mean, I think all signs are my understanding of the automotive industry and of the landscape in which we're living is that this transition is going to continue. And so we need to make sure that we design this transportation system for resilience. And that means not just, again, 10xing the infrastructure, or making it more expensive, or hardening, or things like that. It's about more than that. It's about administrative capacity, and it's about workforce, and about community resilience, and all these kind of things like that. And if we can put those together, then we can actually engineer a more resilient electric vehicle infrastructure. I'll say another key takeaway that we really learned was that when the communities talk to us about resilience, they're really thinking quite broadly. And this is a very important learning, I think, again, for us in the university world, where we're doing these technical models and we're trying to do computer models of the way people drive and do all this kind of stuff like that. And when we think about resilience, and most of the time, we talk about something that's like a rock slide, a single road that gets cut off, or a single node of power that gets cut off, or a single city that loses its communication or something like that. And what we learned from the community is that their concerns and the reality of their concerns are that resilience is about larger geographic size and longer duration. Things like, in the Front Range here, we had an outage due to the high winds in December that was multi-county, multi-city, dozens of miles wide and long, et cetera. So there's some things about that sort of blow our mind when we talk about that in a modeling context, because it's way bigger, it's much longer duration, but also maybe there's a little bit of notice, maybe there's more planning, maybe there's more that we can actually inform the public about what's happening that we will need to think about when we think about resilience. And the last key takeaway, I think, is really the extraordinary value that you all in the community really provided into our engineering and planning activities. So it really revealed, I think, a lot of the challenge, but also a lot of the promise of this transition that we're undergoing to electrified transportation and what the role of resilience in electrified transportation future is going to be. But there was lots of new ideas that came out of these sessions, including ideas that are right now in our modeling and engineering and planning communications to the state and to other stakeholders, which is things like workforce training and emergency response and V2G and shared community infrastructure and all these kind of things. So to me, the point is that we're really learned from you all that the pilots and the examples that are being exercised right now all across Colorado are going to have Colorado-specific lessons about how we can manage this infrastructure. And the more conversations we can have like this, where we're sharing the results of that and sharing the pain points and sharing the successes, the better this transition will be. So to me, at least, I think the key takeaway here, the conclusion really is that we need to design and build the infrastructure that is going to support electric vehicles out into the future. And in the future, they're going to be 100% of the buses that are out there in our municipality. They're going to be 100% of the fleets and vehicles sold, or at least pretty darn close. And so as a result of your input over the last year and here, we now really, I think, have learned a lot and built the ideas and frameworks and modeling tools that I hope will be able to transmit this on into our future. So I sort of put these key bullet points here, the kind of things that we learned, which is the real role of resilience and redundancy, the role of workforce and knowledge development around EV infrastructure, and the role of resilience, equity, and trust building around our communities and around the various geography and polities of Colorado to be able to enable this kind of work. So what I kind of hope is that, this is the prompt then to go back to Willie's survey and be able to put in a little bit of input to us. Let us know if there's other things that we should be doing here. I'll only describe the last step is that we have a couple of things that we're doing with your information carrying forward, and I just tried to put them the direct next steps for your advisement here. We have worked with the Department of Local Affairs, Colorado Resiliency Framework Update. We've done reporting out to CEO and CDOT. We've reported out to dozens of EVSE and EV manufacturers about the things they need to do to improve our work in Colorado. We've done a bunch of outreach to Colorado stakeholders and even to the Department of Defense, Department of War. We're working on Colorado's whole of state critical infrastructure and resilience planning using exactly the insights that you all give us. So I'm going to send out these slides. I'll send out our reporting and stuff like that. But I would urge everybody to do these last questions. And if you have any comments, I'm glad to stick around for another half hour and answer any questions and comments with our team. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for your discussion. It was really awesome and just delighted to be able to report out on this work. Thank you.
And just a quick comment, Dr. Bradley. The reason we have this event that we hosted today was a direct request from the communities that we presented. We had several people ask, we're here, what does it mean for later on down the road, or what are you going to do with this information? So this was the result of that question, and hope that we could share the results and share some of the findings we had across the state of Colorado. So thank you all for attending, and we really do appreciate it. And please do click on the link there and pin your location. Like I said, we've got 23 responses and would hope for a few more, but we have some pretty good um, folk across the state of Colorado. So La Plata, Alamosa, Chaffee, and then the Front Range is definitely well represented with Garfield, Eagle, and Summit. So
Thank you, Willie.
thank you guys.
Okay, so again, a chance for interjections or if folks want to have a broader discussion. So I'm going to open it up to discussion. Anybody want to raise your hand or come off mute and feel free to discuss. Any other input from the team or things that I missed here?
Hey, this is, oh, sorry, you go, Tim.
Willie, have you run all of the questions through?
Nope, I just clicked on to question number 6. So
Okay.
we are at number 6. If you guys want to respond to that, I will try to get through all of them as soon as we get enough responses.
Right.
Thanks, Tim.
Hi, I'll jump in. I'm Morgan Hill. I'm from Clean Energy Economy for the region. And we are the recharge coach for the 14 county Northwest Colorado region. And Dova from our team is the main person who does that. So I'm kind of speaking from not the person who does a lot of that energy coaching, but that is a service that we provide. But Dova and I are working together on implementing our EV readiness and action plan for Garfield County. And I also am an EV owner, so I'm kind of, learning my own, going through my own experiences of what that's like. But one thing I think in terms of resilience and kind of that equity access to EV charging that I wanted to bring up is multifamily housing.
Yeah.
And that's a topic that we wrote an article about it. And Dova has been working with a multifamily cohort trying to expand access to that. So just kind of highlighting that that's another area where we feel like, it's almost impossible unless you have access to really reliable workplace charging, which I will say actually is the case for me. I live in multifamily. We're fortunate enough to have garages. So I can trickle charge in my garage, but it would be almost impossible to put in a level 2. But we have great EV charging here at our offices for Clear. So kind of recognizing that, there are other options, and that helped me pull the trigger on my car, was knowing I had access to workplace charging. But if I didn't have that, I don't think I would have maybe made the decision to get one. So I think, yeah, that would be another point I'd make.
Yeah, definitely recognize that challenge. And I mean, I think it's interesting because, again, I think that is a challenge that we, sort of see both, I should say across the urban rural divide or whatever in the state, because multifamily housing is present in both of those kind of places. So, yeah, so I definitely recognize that. And I think it's I mean, in the context of resilience, right? I mean, it might be that you've got some ability to charge at work is really gonna makes it so that even if your house goes has some challenge or whatever, loses power or something like that, you can continue to operate your vehicle. So yeah, just sort of that makes sense. All those comments make sense, and I'm really grateful that you actually brought up Clear's role as the as a charging coach and EV planning activities as well. So that's really great to be reminded.
Sure. Yeah, we were happy to help host the workshop in the last summer or fall. I lose track of time, but yeah, it was a great discussion there.
Other comments or folks? Mike, yeah, please.
Hey, Thomas, thank you. That's a great summary. I don't disagree with anything that you and your team have pulled together. I work for Tri-State Generation and Transmission, so we support a lot of rural co-ops in Colorado. I just have a few things I'll try to outline, and I think most of them kind of align with what you've gathered. But some of the experience that I've had, um, the some of the distribution utilities are really hesitant to install fast chargers. There's a lot of CapEx. The equipment itself is not inexpensive, and then there's the associated infrastructure cost to get, three-phase distribution to the location. And then on the operational side, even when it's running well, there's potential for high demand fees and low utilization. So, that's not a good business model. And then the grants that have become or, were available don't really incentivize the rural folks because it's hard for them to justify installing one 150 kW charger, but NEVI requirements are 4. So, we're that's like probably, that's a minimum of $1 million invested with the business case challenge that we've already identified. The battery integrated packages, I thought were an opportunity. There's some that got installed. FreeWire shutting the doors did not help the co-op point of view and, fast charging challenge perception. I still think that battery integrated units make the most sense to try to get into the rural areas sooner than later. So programs around that support those battery integrated units, I think would make sense. I think this is my last note. So some of the distribution co-ops that are on corridors that have some, high utilization where, for the most part, Tesla has installed chargers. And so those are on the co-op's lines. The co-op sees, oh, Tesla does have utilization, and this does help us sell energy. There's demand impacts on the grid, right? But they're selling enough energy that they're very happy. And those co-ops might be a little bit more open to installing equipment. The last thing I was going to say is that in rural areas, and this makes sense, right? They want to be able to buy vehicles locally. So that's generally going to be, and they seem to, they favor American manufacturers. So they're looking for a Ford or a Chevy. So Ford's recent change, from going to a BEV to a series hybrid and that vehicle not being available for a while yet is not helping in the rural area either.
Yeah. I'll share with you. I mean, I maybe I just have a couple of, points there, which is, one is with regards to like batteries and these kind of things like that. I view this as a snapshot in time, of course, right? And I think that there will be a lot of technological advancements and these kind of things like that are going to help us in this direction. So lower battery costs and improved controls and all these kind of things like that. These are going to make it, I think, so that that grid integration piece will get better with time, and the costs of integration will get better with time. But again, I totally recognize the challenges that are there right now. But just like I was describing, I mean, I think we're sort of trying to think about this in a big transition point of view, right? And so it might be that there's some opportunities there that evolve or emerge as the low temperature tolerance of batteries gets better, which they will. The other thing that I wanted to think about too, or I wanted to bring up was actually one of the things that was very interesting, I thought, was we were having conversations in locations like Pueblo, and that actually, like a lot of what the electric vehicles that they were selling at the dealerships in Pueblo were, right now, low cost electric vehicles are those that are not made generally by the US manufacturers, since Chevy stopped selling things like the Bolt and such, right? So low cost electric vehicles, I think, they asserted and had data to demonstrate that they were sort of actually quite popular, especially in the rural regions around Pueblo, because there was a lot of opportunity for people to have, one, a Kia electric vehicle or something like that, and an F-150 that was their truck that they used whenever they needed to do whatever it was they needed to do. If they're going to Walmart, then they'd take the Kia, and if they're going to the hardware store, then they'd take the truck. And that's so it was sort of interesting because, again, it kind of upended some of my mindset about what the opportunities around rural electrification were, and the right type of vehicles to be able to serve that need. So it's always the case, but whenever we go out and talk to the people that are just like I sort of described, it turns out actually that the dealers have a really interesting knowledge about their communities and about EV infrastructure needs and stuff like that, that at least were new information to me. So I just share that here. Nicholas, I mean, I see your comment there about charging infrastructure companies and the roles of having multiple networks and multiple providers in order to enable resilience. I mean, I would invite. Do you want to ask a question or comment about that, or give us some advisement?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, like, if you're driving a gas car, that you would see that there's a Maverick and like a Get and Go, like on one street corner. But when you go to charge your electric vehicle, there's typically only Tesla or only Electrify America. And so like that just makes it difficult if one of them are having issues, like say Electrify America's network is down, which has nothing to do with actually electricity being delivered. You don't have another option, and then you just sit there, you're dead on the road. But if there is like an Iona charging station across the street, then you can just go over there and charge that. Just like if you go credit card network was down, you would be able to just go across the street to the Maverick and charge too, or fill up your gas car.
Totally. I mean, everybody's had that experience. I mean, I think so. Yeah, it's a challenge. And I mean, again, I think when we think about it from a resilience point of view, I mean, one option is to make sure that the communication network never goes down or something like that, right? Well, I mean, it's sometimes those challenges really are local. I mean, that the cell network goes down, but more often it's a real infrastructural problem, right? More often it's a problem that's somewhere in Silicon Valley somewhere. And so as opposed to that, the other option is to make it so that that kind of information is easier for consumers to have. So that if you could actually, I mean, I'm responding to another comment earlier, right? Which is that if you actually knew what the capability, if there's better data on the capability of the of the EVSC that you're pulling up to, if you knew how long the lines were, if you knew how, what the last person in line got out of their charger or something like that. If you could understand that one was functional and one was not functional, if there was an ability to, that chargers could test better for things like vandalism or something like that. Well, those would be things that would just improve your information picture about the EV infrastructure that is out there. And that would improve resilience, just through better data, a better understanding. So I think it speaks to, again, the big idea is that there's lots of different ways we could affect this. It doesn't have to just be that everything starts to operate at 100% all the time, because that wouldn't be realistic. Instead, what we need to do is we need to figure out ways that we can build better systems and better information systems to let the to let the infrastructure do its job, which is to get us from point A to point B. I'm going to repeat Mike's comment here because he can't come off mute, but he says a trend that he's seen is that once a large charging network sets up shop in a community, you see second and third proposals nearby. Maybe it's because of the user demand. Maybe it's because they've already, there's only, they've already done the work to do the research and to pay for upgrades or stuff like that. And there's the ice has been broken on local EV infrastructure or something like that. So anyway, I'm grateful for your comment, Mike. Anybody else want to give us some insights?
One of the things we've heard out on the west side of the state, going down I-70, we had this discussion several times, several places, about signs along I-70 saying where there were actually stations located. And I kept saying, I never saw any signs. So when I started looking for them, I did see them, but they're about this big. And it's really hard to tell. And so people don't really understand where the charging stations are. I think if they're going down the highway at 80 miles an hour, 75, whatever it is. So I think there's some things other than that are, I don't know what you call these, are organizational management issues, I guess you would call them, to make the information more available to people. And then that would also increase the resiliency, I think, as we move along.
Yeah, quite right. Well, what I will offer then is, again, we're going to share these slides and Bonnie will share this recording. But maybe what I'll just do is I'll just conclude here and say, again, thank you so much to those of you who participated in our workshop events over the last year. Again, it's really, for me, again, it was very exciting to be able to go out and talk to hundreds of people about what electric vehicle infrastructure looks like, what their hopes are for Colorado in the future, for what their concerns are for their communities. That's such a, to me at least, that's a very enriching and really valuable conversation. So I just was absolutely delighted to be able to do that. And I'm sure I speak for our team when I say that everybody felt exactly the same way, that this was an extraordinary investment of time and effort from those of you out there in the Colorado community, in the EV community. And we really, we sort of have a responsibility, I feel like, to be able to come back and talk to you about what we saw and about what our learnings were and about what we're doing going forward. So the invitation is there that if we can do more, if there's things that came up that you want to talk about, if you'd like to have this conversation in your community and you didn't see us on that map, then please reach out to me or reach out to Bonnie, the organizer of this workshop through Drive Clean Colorado. And we'd be glad to set something up and do something fun. We have many resources at the Colorado State University through our university part and also through the Office of Extension and Engagement that can help you. We have many resources through Drive Clean Colorado and the state and our partners at the National Lab of the Rockies, et cetera. So we're lucky to live in this state because we have these kind of extraordinary folks that are doing this work. So just say again, thank you for your participation here. Please reach out if I can help. And I hope everybody has a great Monday. Okay?
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks all.
Cheers. Thank you.